The Shadow Council descends. For 4 decades, humanity had kept a secret. Not from ourselves, but from the stars themselves. In the beginning, when the first radio signals reached Earth from beyond our solar system, governments had panicked. The message was simple and in its simplicity terrifying. We were not alone. But what came after the silence was worse than any warning. Nothing followed. For years, the void was quiet. Intelligence agencies scrambled. Scientists argued. Philosophers debated the meaning of our insignificance, and then slowly a terrible realization took hold: we were being watched. Not threatened, not yet contacted, just watched. Like insects beneath the gaze of something vast and patient. That was when the decision was made. Not by any single nation or government, but by all of them together. For the first time in human history, Earth unified. Not through conquest or ideology, but through survival. The United Earth Collective was born in secret chambers. Its existence known only to presidents, generals, and a carefully selected few. And from that moment, humanity began to build. The Mars colonies flourished in silence. Europa's underwater cities thrived beneath the ice. The asteroid belt became a fortress of shipyards and mining operations. In the heart of the asteroid series, engineers and scientists worked tirelessly on a project so audacious, so desperate, that even speaking its name in daylight felt like tempting fate. They called it the Vanguard. 40 years of hidden preparation, 40 years of technological leaps that would have seemed impossible to the world outside. Quantum processors that could calculate target trajectories in milliseconds. Hull plating forged from exotic materials stripped from asteroid cores. Weapon systems that turned kinetic energy into annihilation. And through it all, the people of Earth watched and waited, knowing that someday the watching would end. That day came on a Tuesday. Commander Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of Orbital Station 1, her hands clasped behind her back, watching the 3 massive shapes that had appeared at the edge of the solar system. They hung in space like predators silhouetted against the distant sun. Her comms officer, a young woman named Keiko, had gone pale when she first reported them. "They're massive," Keiko had whispered. "I've never seen anything that large," Chen had nodded slowly. She had, in simulations, in the databases compiled by Earth's best astrophysicists. These were Vex Dominion vessels, an empire that stretched across 1,000 worlds, held together by fear and the inexorable logic of conquest. They didn't negotiate with lesser species. They absorbed them, assimilated them. Sometimes, when resistance proved stubborn, they simply sterilized entire planets and moved on. The radio crackled to life. A voice emerged, vast, resonant, somehow ancient and sharp at once. It carried the weight of a civilization that had forgotten how to see other species as anything but resources to be extracted or threats to be neutralized. "This is the Vex Dominion Enclave Authority. Your species occupies strategic space. You will surrender to protective custody. Resistance will be pacified. You have 1 solar cycle to prepare for evacuation. Do not test our patience. This is not a negotiation." The transmission ended. The 3 ships moved forward, not toward Earth, not yet, but positioning themselves at key points around the solar system. The message was clear. They had already won. Everything that followed would merely be the formality of occupation. Chen's jaw tightened. She pressed a single button on her wrist communicator. "Earth, this is Orbital," Vex Contact confirmed. "Initiate Protocol Exodus. I repeat, Protocol Exodus is go." Across the solar system, in boardrooms and command centers, in hidden bunkers and on distant moons, the response was immediate. Humanity's defense network mobilized in silence, not with the roar of armies or the thunder of missiles, but with purpose and precision. 40 years of preparation were no longer theoretical. They were now inevitable. 22 hours later, Commander Chen stood in a transport vessel, en route to Neutral Station 7, watching Earth grow smaller behind her. With her were 3 diplomats, the finest speakers humanity could offer. Their mission was simple: buy time, stall, negotiate. Do anything to keep the Vex talking while Earth's true response took shape in the shadows. She had not told them about the Vanguard. None of them knew. Not the diplomats, not the Vex, not even half of Earth's military command. Only a select few carried the knowledge. And those few had already transmitted the final activation code to the asteroid belt. The Vanguard was waking up. Neutral Station 7 orbited a dead world, a planet long since stripped of resources and abandoned by whatever civilization had once called it home. The station itself was a marvel of neutral engineering, owned by none and accessible to all. Dozens of species had representatives here, ready to bear witness to the proceedings. Some were allies to the Vex, their empires intertwined by treaty and conquest. Others were younger species recently brought into the galactic fold, their representatives still learning the brutal mathematics of interstellar politics. And then there were those few who watched and waited, calculating, wondering if the galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented. The council chamber was vast, a sphere of gleaming white metal, ringed with observation galleries. At the center, a platform had been arranged. The Vex delegation occupied one side, their representatives towering figures of crystalline exoskeleton and predatory grace. Their commander, a being named Kethnor, bore scars that spoke of 1,000 conquered worlds. His eyes, if they could be called that, were multifaceted sensors that seemed to observe everything at once. Commander Chen took her place on the human platform, her diplomats arranging themselves behind her. She wore the formal attire of the United Earth Collective, deep blue with silver insignia, chosen to represent the unity of their homeworld. She looked small next to the Vex, fragile, insignificant. It was exactly what they wanted her to look. Kethnor stepped forward, and the entire chamber seemed to hold its breath. "Humans," he began, his voice resonating through amplification systems. "Your species has hidden itself admirably. Our long-range sensors only detected your presence recently. This is interesting. It suggests capability, perhaps even intelligence." He paused as if considering. "However, capability without wisdom is a dangerous thing. The Vex Dominion offers you a chance for survival. Surrender your homeworld. Dismantle your military infrastructure. Accept integration into our protection matrix. In return, your people will be permitted to survive in designated sectors of your own space. They will work, contribute, and remain alive. It is a generous offer." Around the chamber, representatives from 100 species shifted in their seats. Some nodded as if this was reasonable. Others remained silent. Chen noted each reaction carefully. Allies would be few. The universe, she had learned, had little use for the weak. She stood. The gesture alone seemed to draw attention, as if the observers were surprised she had the audacity to rise at all. "The United Earth Collective appreciates your offer," she said, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "But we must respectfully ask for time to consider. Such a decision affects our entire species. Our people must have a voice. May we request a period of consultation before we provide our final answer?" Kethnor's multifaceted eyes seemed to focus entirely on her. "You wish to delay? We wish to be thorough," Chen replied. "Surely the Vex Dominion, with all your wisdom and experience, would not ask us to decide the fate of our entire civilization in a moment." It was a calculated risk, an appeal to arrogance, to the certainty that the Vex had already won. And it worked. Kethnor actually seemed to consider the point. Around him, other Vex commanders conferred in sounds that resembled the grinding of stone. Finally, he turned back to her. "You will have the Earth rotation cycle, 18 of your hours. Then you will return with your answer. If that answer is anything other than unconditional surrender, my fleet will descend upon your world and the matter will be resolved by force. We are patient, but we are not infinitely so." "Thank you," Chen said, and she meant it. 18 hours. It was enough. It had to be enough. She turned and walked from the platform, her diplomats following. Behind her, Kethnor watched, his crystalline form glinting in the station's artificial light. He had already won. Humanity was simply too small, too new, too insignificant to present any real challenge. They would fall into line like all the others, and the universe would continue its ancient pattern of dominance and submission. He did not know that 18 light hours away, a ship the size of a small moon was opening its eyes for the first time. Chen returned to her transport vessel, and the moment the airlock sealed behind her, she transmitted a single message across the quantum-encrypted network that linked Earth to its hidden corners of the solar system. "Execute, Vanguard. Full mobilization. All systems go." The response came back in seconds, in a voice that was both machine and human, both calm and tinged with the weight of everything humanity had sacrificed to reach this moment. "Vanguard acknowledging. All systems operational. Standing by for coordinates. We are ready to defend the world that made us." Behind Jupiter's enormous mass, shielded by the magnetosphere of the gas giant itself, a shape began to move. It emerged from the asteroid belt like a leviathan surfacing from an ocean that spanned the solar system itself. 2 kilometers long, 1,000 subsystems coming online, weapons that hadn't been fired in anger in all the 40 years of its construction, hungry to prove their worth. The Vanguard was no longer a dream. It was no longer a gamble or a prayer whispered into the void. It was reality, cold, hard, and absolutely lethal, and it was coming home to defend its world. The galaxy had sent diplomats to demand humanity's surrender. But what was about to descend upon them would be far worse for the Vex than any mere warship could be. It would be the answer that every conquered species before them had been too weak to give. It would be no. The Vanguard rises. The waiting was the worst part. 18 hours stretched into an eternity of stillness. Commander Chen sat in her quarters aboard the transport, watching the chronometer tick forward with agonizing slowness. Outside, through the small viewport, she could see the Vex ships maintaining their positions. Patient, implacable, utterly certain of their victory. They had no idea that their prey was no longer alone. They had no idea that the very definition of dominance was about to be rewritten in fire and light. In the corridors of Neutral Station 7, her diplomats tried to maintain the appearance of normalcy. They attended meals with other delegations, discussed trade agreements that would never come to pass, participated in the theater of politics that had become meaningless the moment the Vanguard came online. All of it was buying time. All of it was holding the galaxy's attention in one place while history moved in another, 20 light hours away. Captain Marcus Rivera stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, watching the tactical display unfold before him. The ship's AI system, designated Area for Adaptive Response Intelligence Array, fed him real-time data from across the solar system. His crew of 500 had trained for this moment their entire lives. Some had been born aboard the Vanguard itself, never seeing Earth's blue sky, raised in corridors of steel and the knowledge that they existed for a single purpose, to be the sword that protected humanity's cradle. The Vex fleet was moving, not toward Earth but outward, taking positions around the major planets. The blockade was forming. They were preparing to enforce their ultimatum, secure in the knowledge that no resistance could possibly overcome the firepower they now commanded. 40 warships, dozens of support vessels, an armada that had conquered 1,000 worlds. They had never faced anything like the Vanguard. All weapon systems online, reported Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka from the weapons console, her voice steady despite the tremor that ran through the bridge. Railguns charged, plasma arrays at full capacity. Point Defense Network has acquisition locks on. Sir, we're tracking 47 signatures. More than anticipated, Captain Rivera said calmly, but we expected reinforcements. The Vex always travel with auxiliary vessels. Area calculate optimal intercept vectors. I want engagement windows for the primary targets. Calculations complete, Captain, the AI responded, its voice synthesized but somehow warm. Recommend initial intercept at coordinates Delta 79er. Range from our current position, 2.3 million kilometers. Projected engagement window opens in 42 minutes. Rivera nodded. He had been waiting for this his entire life. His father had been one of the original architects of the Vanguard project, dying of old age before he could ever see his creation finished. His mother had been among the first engineers brought to the asteroid belt to build it. He had grown up in zero-gravity docking bays, learning the language of thrust and targeting, velocity and vectors. Every system on this ship flowed through his understanding like blood through veins. All hands. This is the captain, he announced, his voice broadcasting through every compartment, every corridor, every chamber of the massive warship. Our time has come. For 40 years we have trained in the shadows. For 40 years our families have sacrificed in silence. Today we stop hiding. Today we show the galaxy what humanity is capable of. Today we prove that we will not be conquered. General quarters. Battle stations. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. The Vanguard moved. The maneuver was graceful despite the ship's enormous mass, 2 kilometers of engineered muscle and technological prowess accelerating at speeds that would have torn apart any conventional warship. But the Vanguard had not been built with conventional physics in mind. Its engines were based on principles that Earth scientists had spent decades refining, borrowed from the stars themselves and adapted by human ingenuity into something new, something powerful, something that turned the impossible into merely improbable. The first Vex ship to detect them was a scout vessel, small, fast, and lightly armed. Its sensors screamed the alarm that no Vex had ever had to broadcast before. Unknown contact bearing. The Vanguard's first shot came like divine judgment, a single kinetic round, accelerated to a fraction of light speed through magnetic rails, traveled the space between ships in the time it took for a human to blink. The scout vessel didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist. Where there had been structure and purpose, there was now only expanding debris and the memory of what had been. The Vex warship was erased so completely that for a moment, the sensor network struggled to believe what they had registered. Direct hit, Tanaka reported, her voice carrying undertones of awe. Scout vessel neutralized. Full dispersal pattern. Multiple hull breaches. Confirmed kill. Around the solar system, the Vex Armada responded with the reflexive movements of a species that had never known defeat. Attack formations coalesced. Weapon systems came online. The blockade transformed into a battle line, but there was confusion in their movements. They had been expecting something small, something desperate, something that would be quickly overwhelmed. Instead, they had found something vast, something methodical, something that had just destroyed a starship in a single shot. Second wave incoming, Area announced. 15 Vex vessels maintaining formation. 16 others attempting to circle around our starboard flank. Recommend evasive maneuvers. Negative, Captain Rivera said. Hold our course. Let them come to us. The Vanguard wasn't built to run. The Vex fired first. Dozens of energy weapons, plasma cannons, devices that had reduced countless civilizations to ash and memory. The collective firepower of a fraction of their fleet was something that should have annihilated anything smaller than a planet. It streaked across the void like a constellation of deadly stars. The Vanguard's point defense systems responded with the speed of an artificial mind that processed calculations faster than thought. Laser arrays activated. Particle cannons hummed to life. The incoming fire was met with countermeasures, and what survived that was absorbed by hull plating that had been designed to withstand exactly this kind of punishment. The Vanguard rocked. Alarms screamed through the bridge. A section of the starboard hull vented atmosphere. But the ship was still moving. Still dangerous. Still absolutely lethal. Damage report, Rivera commanded. Minimal hull breaches in sections 4 through 7, Tanaka replied. Pressure doors engaged. Casualty count. 13 confirmed dead, 42 wounded. Hull integrity at 93%. All weapon systems nominal. 13 dead. Rivera allowed himself a moment to acknowledge their sacrifice. Then he was moving forward again. Return fire. Full barrage. Show them what the Vanguard can do. The response was overwhelming. The Vanguard's primary weapons battery, held in reserve until this moment, unleashed itself upon the Vex formation. Kinetic rounds, plasma bolts, waves of pure concentrated energy. A torrent of destruction that turned the mathematical certainty of the Vex formation into chaos. 3 cruisers fell. A dreadnought took critical damage and began to limp away from the engagement. The rest of the Vex fleet scattered, regrouping, trying to calculate how to overcome an enemy that didn't follow any of the rules their 1,000-year empire had taught them. Enemy formation breaking apart. Aria reported with something that almost sounded like satisfaction in its voice. Recommend continuing pursuit of primary targets. Estimated time to next engagement, 4 minutes, 4 minutes. 4 minutes for the Vex to realize that their centuries of dominance had just been shattered by a species that had hidden in its corner of the galaxy and built one ship, one perfect, terrible, beautiful ship. Back on Earth, in bunkers and command centers, humanity watched. The data streaming back from the Vanguard was being processed, analyzed, displayed on screens across the globe. In Times Square, in Shanghai, in Cairo, in Sao Paulo, and Moscow, people stood transfixed as the impossible unfolded before their eyes. The Vanguard was real. The Vanguard was fighting. The Vanguard was winning. Aboard Neutral Station 7, Commander Chen received the first battle reports and allowed herself the smallest of smiles. Around her, the other delegates had begun to notice. The Vex representatives were receiving frantic communications, their crystalline form seeming to fracture with tension and disbelief. One of the older observers, a representative from the Keithian collective, a species that had been subjugated by the Vex generations ago, leaned toward Chen. "Your people," she said quietly. They are not surrendering. They are fighting back. Yes, Chen confirmed. We are. You will lose, the Keithian said, but there was something new in her voice. Hope, perhaps, or the memory of it from before her people were conquered. Perhaps, Chen acknowledged. But we will not go quietly. We will not accept subjugation. And even if we fall, we will fall as a free people. Is that not worth something? The Keithian seemed to consider this. Then, slowly, she nodded. 2 hours into the battle, the Vex commander made a decision that was, in its own way, the greatest tribute he could pay to humanity. He ordered a retreat. The mighty Vex armada, the fleet that had conquered 1,000 worlds, began to disengage. Ships that had never known defeat peeled away from the engagement zone. The vanguard pursued, picking off stragglers, making every enemy warship that fled carry scars back to Vex space. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the exodus accelerated. The Vex fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind debris and the wreckage of their certainty. They had come to demand surrender from a small, young species. Instead, they had encountered something that forced them to retreat. In the annals of Vex military history, it would be recorded not as a loss but as a tactical redeployment. But every being in the galaxy would understand the truth. The unconquerable had been beaten back. The unstoppable had been stopped. The vanguard broadcast a signal across all known frequencies. It was short, simple, and understood by every species in the galaxy. This is the United Earth Collective warship Vanguard. The Vex Dominion fleet has been repelled from Earth space. We are a free people. We will remain free. We come to you not as conquerors, but as neighbors who will defend our own. Let it be known that humanity is no longer a question. We are an answer. In the silence that followed, the entire galaxy recalibrated its understanding of what was possible. Species that had been plotting conquest of Earth began whispering of trade agreements. The Vex, for all their size and reach, began planning how to contain rather than crush this new threat. And on the worlds of minor powers and young civilizations, hope kindled. If humans could do this, perhaps they could too. Captain Rivera stood on the observation deck of the Vanguard, watching the space where the enemy had been. The ship was damaged but intact. Casualties were minor compared to what they could have been, and the galaxy would never be the same. We did it, Lieutenant Tanaka said softly, standing beside him. No, Rivera replied. We just began it. But yes, this was the first step. Behind Earth, around Mars, throughout the asteroid belt, humanity looked up at the stars and saw not threats but challenges. The age of hiding was over. The age of preparation had yielded its fruit, and in the vast darkness of the cosmos, a young species had announced its arrival with a single, unmistakable message. We are here. We are strong. We will not surrender. And somewhere in the depths of space, other species listened, learned, and began to understand that the universe had just become far more complicated and far more interesting.